Welcome, and thank you for joining us here on Shady Sports Network. My guest today is Zach Keilman of the USFL Podcast, as well as Inside the Walls Podcast. If you want great coverage of the USFL or the NAL, definitely check out both of those channels here on YouTube. I'm a fairly frequent viewer myself, so I highly recommend both channels for sure. With that being said, it's a pleasure to have you on here today. How are you doing today?
Life's good, man. I've gotten plenty of my own football. I'm glad I get to talk 24/7 football at this point. But right now with the holiday season, it's nice. Just kind of waiting things through. Got a trip to Chicago coming up. A little personal thing for me, but yeah, good times right now.
Very nice. Very nice. Is that a Michigan Panthers shirt I spy?
Oh, of course. I got to rep my team.
Very
I got
nice.
other stuff, but I mean, this is the thing I can wear to the office that doesn't look too out of place there.
That makes perfect sense. I love it.
Yeah.
It is definitely a dressier shirt. It looks good. I like it.
Well, thank you very much.
Absolutely. So obviously, as I just mentioned, Zach's probably one of the authorities on the NAL, at being that he is the official podcast host of the NAL. With that being out of the way, I'm gonna kind of change gears right away on you. We're gonna start with the AFL, given that that's kind of the big news for the moment. So I figured I kind of want to get your opinion on all the news that's come out. Obviously, they've got a website that's launched recently, brand new branding, changed location, a new logo. It seems like merchandise is kind of live at this point. So we've got a ton of different news to chop up here. Where do you think this league is headed currently?
So right now, I still have a lot of things unanswered. I did a lot of deep diving when someone in our Inside the Walls Discord that you and I are in brought this up about, hey, look, it's a new logo on here. I'm like, oh, and then you see the new website, theafl.com. Not too much is there, but you kind of just keep digging around and, eventually, some folks come into the fray. There's a gentleman by the name of Kurt Feldkeller that is on LinkedIn that kind of is the chief executive officer for the league right now. There's other things been looking up, like, for example, there's G6 Enterprises that's behind it. It's a big conglomerate venture capitalist group. There's other sponsors that are on it too, like Athletic Gains, which is like a popular, like a athletic training gym on there. There's this place, Legacy Sports and Entertainment, which is out of like Mesa, Arizona. There's a lot of stuff. All I can tell you is that there's a lot of connected things, but there's still not enough answers for me to say, okay, what is all here? And anything that I do find, and there are people that know this is existing, but the thing is, they must be doing a great job at saying hush hush about everything that's going on, because anyone you talk to that at least is associated with whoever's running the AFL right now, the AFL doesn't want anything out there. That's the thing. They want to be the ones that control basically up to the minute. Whenever they announce what they're going to announce, they're going to drop. The only thing I know is that they're starting April 2024. That's about it, the springtime. But that's it. Until we just see some more, I'm not 100% sure. I mean, there's rumors out there who might else be behind it. And I'm not going to say beyond this, but whoever that person might be, that might be good money that person holds up. But it's hard to say. It's kind of preliminary stuff. All I keep hearing is guys that at least worked with the AFL or like knew the name and were in it. They're like, this will be interesting, but in a good way is what they keep telling me. It's just, there's not enough out there yet. You can find a lot of digging stuff, but you're not going to find concrete things because there's that hush hush at this time.
Absolutely. I'm glad that you kind of shouted out the Discord there. Check out the Inside the Walls Discord server. That was where all the news kind of came to my attention, actually. So I wanted to shout out you, Albany defense kid, I believe it is.
That's right.
And also Jim. You'll have to help me with his last name.
It's Meunier. It's a French last name. He's used to it, but yeah, Meunier. The best way I could put it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and Jim's been such a great co-host with me. I'm glad I jumped in with him on the NAL stuff that we're doing on that end. But that's Discord server. That's just passionate fans for the NAL that they also love the AFL days too. Jim will tell you he'll be one of the first to say he loved the AFL. It's the reason he loves this sport. And I think that a lot of people like you and I are responding that same way because I I was given this phrase from a friend of mine. The AFL's branding, even almost 4 years gone at this, actually 4 years gone now, since November of 2019, it's still, you can argue, is the strongest arena brand in the nation. And that's a dead league. You know, the IFL's gotten better. I'm going to say this right here. The IFL's branding is definitely gotten better. The NAL, it's got some work to do, but it's getting there. But if I slap an AFL on there, people know what the AFL is right away. So
Absolutely.
people are excited because that brand still has potential, and people are making murmurs behind the scenes of if and when most likely when it's coming back.
Absolutely. Speaking of which, we got a comment. Jordan, the JPN 23 says, shout out to the Discord. Yes, I definitely wanted to make sure we talked about that because quite honestly, the work that whole group did collectively to kind of dig on this was amazing. I mean, it happened fast too. We were all kind of put in our little piece, and it was awesome to see it all kind of come together like that.
I can tell you that was most of my night at work. I work nights, and sometimes it gets boring. So I spent half that night probably doing a bunch of that behind the scenes, like just digging through websites and like other LinkedIn accounts just to see what the hell is all this attachments to it, which my understanding of what is behind this league is so much better because of it. And all that came from, you know, basically that Discord server and man Albany defense kid, or at least that's his screen name, I know. But
yeah,
you know, I've met him in person before. Great guy, and yeah, no, awesome scoop right there. And honestly, JPN 23, good to talk to you. Thanks for being a fan of the show and a fan of anything we're doing. Means a lot. So good to hear from him as well. But I'm just more patient. I'm just trying to see when they finally drop something. That's my next step. Is clearly they're working on things. I think the big question now is more of the when we hear, because you know the scene's getting a little more crowded, and that's just for everything. So you don't want to keep waiting too long. And if you're talking 2024, at least get your announcement out a year prior. It has to be soon, you would think, that they got to drop something out there.
Yeah, I would like that. I mean, you get something right around, as much as I hate to say, at the start of USFL season, right around when FCF kicks off as well. But
that's not bad, though. I mean, here's the thing, and I think the AFL, they know what they are. It's a more niche version of even the sport that we're talking. But it does have an avenue. FCF has an avenue. You know, it's got its market, and those leagues can coexist for that reason. I think the AFL can too. My curiosity is, depending on the funding, does it try and gun for what the IFL and the NAL are doing and go above and beyond that? You know, the less goofy side of the FCF with the more, with a professional spin on it is what it is in the 50-yard game. That's what I think they want to go for, depending on who the funder is. Again, I don't have 100% concrete stuff on that, but any person I talk to that I try and ask about it, all they do is hint is like, oh, it's going to be interesting, good, and there might be some money back there. So we'll see.
Absolutely. I mean, as you talked about before, the naming rights alone have value due to the brand that they were able to build in the early 90s all the way up into the late 2000s. I mean, I remember my first game that I saw back in, I think it was 2006, the Colorado Crush. That atmosphere was electric. And that's actually what made me a fan of the arena game. I had never heard of it before. I went and saw a game with a friend, and it was just an amazing atmosphere. So, I mean, I'm hoping that they can definitely get back to the heights of the league back then. I mean, they were averaging something like 9,000 fans even after the one season hiatus there in 2010. So amazing league. And I really hope they are able to come back. But like you said, the market's getting awfully crowded with all these leagues.
It is. And not only that, but the longer you wait too, and again, credit, I just talked about the AFL's brand, but the IFL is not going to sit around. They've realized that, and this is what I'll give them praise all day for this. They market themselves really well. They've started getting that down really well. The NAL, and I especially know this, Jim and I both know, they aren't sitting around. They are ready to they're the ones trying to bring back the entire AFL game suit as it is. I mean, remember, Nets are coming back this year in the AFL. They're going to be fully back to what the original game was in the late 80s. Iron Man, Nets, you name it. That game's back. So you don't want to wait around too much, because this AFL, if you jump on their website, they're trying to talk about bringing back that traditional game too. Well, you do need to get going if you want to assert yourself beyond that. So I think the NAL is doing a great job with having their game getting set face first and forward. But that is part of the time factor, in my opinion. Get your branding out there if you're going to do it, and then jump on your game, marketing the original game you brought up in the first place. So, yeah, but the competition, it is going to be fierce. Even the CIF, I'll even add them in too, which, they're bringing nets back as well. That's going to be 2 of the 3 leagues. They're going to have rebound nets. That's a key thing. You talk about OG AFL fans, one of the things that they miss from this game that they keep asking the IFL, and they were asking the NAL and the CIF, where's the nets, dude? If we can afford these, that accelerates the game. I can't wait to talk more with the NAL section of that on it, because just hearing that news last year, like I said, the original version is back starting this April. So I am excited to see that form of the game in its entirety back here in, on April 1st, that is, when Columbus takes on San Antonio over there at the Columbus Civic Center.
Absolutely. And let's go ahead and transition with that being the case. I mean, one of the things that I wanted to talk about was the return of the Nets to the National Arena League. That's a big, huge piece of news right now as far as the NAL goes. So obviously you seem to be a fan of the return of the Nets due to the speeding of the game, as you mentioned. I mean, it definitely makes it a lot more electric when you can rebound a kick off of the net and then try and return it, etc. So with that being said, how much do you think that ultimately affects the fans' outlook on the game?
Well, to me, the Nets, what they bring the most is chaos back to the game. So, with indoor football, with what the normal setup for the game is for the big 3 leagues. And when I say the big 3, anytime I'm talking arena indoor, it's IFL, NAL, CIF. Anything else is, to me, the next level down. But the big 3 are those 3. They're the big professional, well, at least the most professional ones in the scene right now. So with the NAL bringing it back and the CIF going to also be bringing it back, it sounds like, you're going to bring chaos to the game. And I mean this in terms of more returns, which is going to make more hectic, possessions just for that alone. Some of the best return men in the league, like Kali Rashad, Darian Townsend, they're going to be even more of a threat than they were last year. You're going to have more kicks that are hitting those rebound nets. Most of the kicks go out of the back of the end zone or out the side. If you hit that, you're going to hit that rebound net almost all the time unless you hit a deuce in the NAL. So effective kick returns, even a Kendrick Ings, those guys are going to thrive off of this system because they can return balls and they can make deadly returns, possibly more touchdowns for teams, which leads to higher scoring. Fans love scoring even more so, not just in the outdoor game, but the indoor game especially. You want to see that go up. More plays that are exciting, more things to not look away from during the game, and less stall, more ball. I'm stealing an XFL phrase there, but I'm going to throw it in because it's true. It's true. Not only do you get more returns, here's the deal. If you might have heard this term, I think, Sam. You ever heard of bar balls? You know what a bar ball is, right? I mean,
yeah, definitely.
Oh yeah, so and for those that maybe don't, I mean, here's the thing: bar hits the bottom bar, the ball hits the bottom bar, hits one of the bars. That bar is not going to guarantee a direct rebound hit. It's going to fly wherever the hell the ball hits. So that is even more chaotic because if that thing hits the ground, it's a live ball. It is anybody's ball. You can recover that thing, you can take it for a touchdown, or you can pick it up and scoop and score one way or another. That was a threatening term back in the AFL days before they switched off, before they went away, of course, and went to wayside in 2019. So chaos. I think that's the best word for it. Just more chaos, but in the best way possible to make this game that much more thriving. And you can catch touchdowns off the net. What sport can you say that you can catch a touchdown off of a net? Only in the NAL. Well, the CIF. Only in arena football. True arena football.
Agreed. So with that being said, I didn't touch on this subject, but now that you brought that up, can a defender also catch an incomplete pass off the net? Well, I guess not incomplete because it's still in play.
Yeah, I mean, as long as it's rebounded off the net, it's still a live ball. So as long as the pass goes and hits the back net and comes back into the field of play, that's free game. I mean, anyone can go and grab that thing and take it whichever way they want. And some of the highlights from the AFL days of the mid 2000s, that is some of the best ones, is rebounds that are for game winners that I've seen. The Cleveland Gladiators had one season where it was like most of their wins were off of last minute, like Hail Marys or like rebound passes off the nets to like get basically the best guy who can get up and get over his man would win. But yeah, anybody can get those. It just adds to the excitement of the game, and it's its own brand. It's trying to be its own brand. It's weird how it's a niche of a niche, but trust me, if you dive hard into this niche, you're rewarded. You're also rewarded with a really good community of people too. Personally, to me, arena fans are some of, if not the best football fans out there, because they defend their sport to the bitter end in a really good way.
I would agree wholeheartedly. Speaking of another arena fan, Jamie Perogue, what's up? Happy holidays, he says. Happy holidays, Jamie. Thanks for tuning in. We appreciate it.
Likewise.
With that being said, I mean, I've heard some rules attached to this net return, and one of the things that I believe I heard Tom Manas talk about, head coach of the Albany Empire, was the fact that they have a halo rule, to where the kick returners are not going to get blasted when they're trying to catch a return off of the net from behind. So they have to have I believe a 5-yard halo, is it?
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, 5-yard halo.
For anybody who's concerned about player safety, don't worry. They've taken that into account. This is not going to end up, really, really hurting somebody in the wrong manner.
I think they wanted to add that too, because back when, the AFL, I think, has been, or at least I keep saying AFL, but it's arena football because I keep associating that. Again, haven't seen it since the AFL, so keep in mind, bear with me. Arena football, I think it's always had a bit of a notion of also being an extreme sport, extra contact. There's less padded walls. You got, padded floors, but there's still concrete under those padded floors if you're not careful. And the original setup was there wasn't a halo rule. So if that thing hits high off the net, well, you got to wait for it to come down. And if you don't catch it, you risk fumbling. But if you catch it and you turn around, well, you kind of die. Like someone just basically whacks you in a split-second effort. So the way that they looked at this, me and Jim talked with a few of the team owners, because they're the ones, they go to the committee meetings, they vote on these rules. And one thing they had said was, we want to make sure that some of the safety element is brought into this, and that we're improving upon the game that we are bringing back. And the halo rule is the best way to do so. Still allows for returns, and you at least give the ball carrier some time to not be a defenseless receiver or defenseless player, so that they can at least be aware of what they're about to get hit with. It's better than getting someone turning split second and essentially getting knocked out onto the ground and with a concussion every play. An advancement, or at least a future proofing of this rule coming back.
I would agree. I think it was a great addition to the rule. I mean, obviously, most of us wanted to see this rule back because, like you spoke about, it creates excitement. It creates chaos in the league. So, I mean, it just changes the game in a split second at any moment. And now this also takes player safety into account. So it's one of those things where I don't ultimately think we're going to see this go away at this point. I think they're here to stay for the foreseeable future.
Likewise indeed. And I think that people will be sold on it come next year. It's I think some are wanting to see how successfully you can bring back the entire arena space. People doubted Ironman last year, and I'll be honest, Ironman started kind of rough last year in the NAL. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. The early weeks, there was some confusion with the sideline judges or substitution judges, is what they called them. And eventually they got that worked out. And by the end of the season, you couldn't tell Ironman was affecting the game, and it made for some special moments and for some players to get some special awards. DJ Myers, as we now know, in the USFL with the Showboats, his brother as well over there, by the way, that dude helped accelerate his game. He already was an excellent receiver in the league. He now is Iron Man of the Year, showed he could play both ways. He was a good linebacker, and he was an excellent receiver still. That, I think, highlights maybe some workability for players that if you wanted to, say, test your skills something else, and maybe you excel, maybe you can go somewhere else and people like what you do otherwise, there's that chance. So I think people will be excited with the Nets back. And I think Iron Man, now they got that down last year, that it's only going to get better now. There's no hiccups and early, I say, bumps and bruises from having to reintroduce it after so long.
Absolutely. So we got another comment coming in. A fairly well-known guy out there on Discord, Freddie Airmail. He says, "Who is this Zach Keilman fella?" And then he says, "Just kidding. I owe this man dinner someday."
So, well, him and I actually had dinner back a few months ago. Met up with him in person. Had Basbo's Pizza in Indianapolis. Excellent pizza spot here in Indy if you're looking for a good pie. was good to run into him. Dude's a real chill guy. Love chatting football up with him. And yeah, he's going to be doing some awesome things talking FCF this year. You should check out, he's got a show coming up soon enough, or he's developing one. So stay tuned to that. He'll tell you all about it if you ask him.
Yeah, I believe it's with Kyle Stathead, a guy.
That's right. Yes, and I feel bad because I was forgetting the name.
That's okay.
That brings it back up. Sorry, Freddie. I apologize.
Yeah, I believe it's Freddie Stat Go, if I'm not mistaken. That's the
correct.
name of the show. Freddie was actually here for the XFL Draft coverage. He helped me out towards the end of the day when I was really fading out, losing my energy, and didn't have any co-hosts left. So it was awesome of him to come on. Thank you, Freddie. I appreciate that. And then Jamie's got a question. What's your thoughts on the XFL coming back? Do you think it'll survive this time around?
Let me hide my Panthers shirt because this is some people, if they see this stuff on, I'm gonna be scrutinized. Look, full disclosure for those talking. Look, yes, I do the USFL podcast. Okay. Other disclosure, I want both these leagues to be playing. That's a straight up thing. I think competition breeds excellence in both competitors here. I'll be honest with you, you saw with the CBA. I think that gets influenced because the XFL brought its own numbers to the table. The USFL does that. So as for the XFL, I'm going to be honest. I think it's with both leagues, the future's uncertain just because of how the numbers will be. The thing right now, I'm waiting with the XFL. Just need some stuff to get out there. Get the schedule going this year. First off, that'll help you a ton. And if you get some good ticket sales, you get those numbers in terms of ABC and ESPN's television, FX as well. I think that there's a chance, and I really do think that there is some way that both the USFL and XFL survive, thrive in their own spaces, and make things work. I mean, we see the options for football keep increasing in the United States. The NFL keeps getting bigger, so folks that are disregarding that, and maybe they don't like the setup that college has right now with the whole NAL and transfer portal setup. I mean, where do you go next? Well, you got other leagues that are professional leagues that are showing off in recent years. Even with the AFF going down since 2019, all we've seen is more examples of this style of sport getting an audience and being really decent quality football. So you see all the talent out there. I mean, the XFL's got quite a bit of talent that they researched into there. I'll be honest, I love their QB rooms. I got to say that, whether it's USFL guys coming over there, whether it's people they found that previously, they got a lot of pieces in place and they got good talented coaches in place. If they can do that, market themselves well with Dwayne Johnson's platform, as well as getting Redbird's finances behind them like they are promising that they will, I think there is definitely a space here. Beyond that, with both the XFL and USFL existing, I don't know if there'll be a merger someday. There's a lot of people that think there will be, but I do think the XFL, in some way, shape, or form, in a capacity, does work this time. That's my opinion.
I would echo that opinion. I mean, top to bottom, yes, there's uncertainty about the league because you just never know a spring football league.
Of course.
I mean, throughout my entire lifetime, there's been one league that's made it multiple seasons, and that was the UFL. And they made it like 2.5 seasons and then folded. So it's a situation where we really just don't know. At the end of the day, I would encourage anybody who's a fan of football to support these leagues. That's how we make them succeed. That's how we make them last long-term and ultimately give these guys alternative leagues to play in long-term.
Well, think about this in terms of the NFL. So I want to give you we'll give you a little bit of news piece, recently. And Sam, you and I heard this, what the NFL is experimenting with talking about this offseason, reviewing pass interferences and roughing the passers, which
yep.
I'll be honest with you. You know what 2 leagues have been doing that? The USFL and then the 2020 version of the XFL and the AAF. They were allowed to do stuff like that and at least review certain items along that line. They're going to do that again with the XFL, by the way, is that coaches get 1 challenge for any call on the field per game this year. And I think that's great. Look, you're putting pressure, in my opinion, on the NFL to make changes. And the more examples of different leagues that can come out and say, hey, we're experimenting with this stuff and it's working well. To me last year, the USFL with the roughing the passer booth reviews, those are fantastic. And the reason why is because you were able to listen to Mike Pereira give clear, concise reasonings for certain hits. Were they malicious? Were there legitimate reasons to throw a flag? Can you reverse this? And some of that actually came up in the playoffs. That Stars Generals game, one of the key interceptions in that game was originally a roughing the passer call that was reversed because they went back and said, you know what? That was a clean hit. It was right after the ball was thrown. That's a normal tackle and pressure. And I think that is beneficial to the game. In a game where, yes, we're protecting the quarterback, but we're making more reactionary calls than we ever have before because we can't keep up with the speed of this. That's one example alone that helps improve the game, and there's many others. Alt football brings that to the table. It forces the NFL to reconsider things, to look at stuff that's successful, and much like the NFL stance, if it starts becoming successful, generally they'll pull the trigger. So they get to sit on the sidelines, let things experiment, and then it makes their game, or most people's favorite game, better.
100%. CFL has also instituted rules like this, and it's been very successful. And I'm glad you brought up that play between Philadelphia and New Jersey, because that was crucial in that game. That interception changed the entire map of that game. And ultimately, Philadelphia won because of it and ended up in the championship game, as you see right behind me. It definitely was a huge change. I actually wrote an article about that in particular rule because we had seen such a failure on the NFL's aspect of that when it came to some of the calls that we've seen this season. It's kind of died down a little bit. It seems like they've kind of addressed it with refs a little bit, but we're coming up into the nitty gritty of the season, the playoff time. So that's probably why a lot of these calls have also gone away as well. Freddie's got a couple more comments here. He says, yeah, we've got some episodes up, and I'd love to see the two leagues push each other to be better. Just don't want it getting ugly and nasty between the two fan bases.
Right. And I'm not going to add too much fire to that because I feel bad with any of this sort of stuff that's currently with the fan bases, but I agree, Freddie. To me, football's football. I don't, again, yeah, I do a show with the that's USFL based. I understand. But I am trying to give you guys the stance. Like, I do want to see the sport get better. These avenues make it better. Competition makes it better. To me, yeah, I get it. Maybe you like one league over the other. That's fine. And this is for both people. Any one of you folks that want to do this, USFL, XFL, FCF, anyone you want to talk to that wants to put down another league, like, look, this is, any competition should help you out to get better. And if you can't keep it in the kitchen, and if you can't cook up a good meal, then you need to get the hell out. And I think that's just going to happen if you can't keep up with the competition. So I think that it's healthy. I think you should support football in general, but realize that this is a business. So, that's all I can say, I guess. I don't know. There's not much more I can add without doing stuff. People still will be fans of whichever one they want, but football's football, man. If you love the sport, you love the sport. That's how it should be first, and if someone does do some BS with a league, call it out then. But if it's an actual BS, there's no reason to put it down.
100%. Let these guys play. And ultimately, it's a world of, the strongest survive. So at the end of the day, the fans will speak, whether they do it on Twitter or they do it with their financial support of whatever league it might be.
Exactly.
So, that's huge at the end of the day. Freddie says MLFB moment.
Now we can all put that one down. That's easy. I'm sorry.
Exactly. That's
I will easily put that one down any given day of the week. And the UFL, that is fake. Anyone that thinks that is a realistic league, I am so sorry, but I will always say that is a scam. The National Gridiron League just reskinned itself. Keep that in mind, people. Educate yourself. Look into the Fort Wayne incident. That's all I got to tell you.
Yes. Really, even if you didn't know the previous history of the ownership group that is now running the UFL, all you have to do is some real easy digging. In fact, just go to their website and see what they're promising and financially think about that in your mind and how feasible that is for a startup league. It's not. They are blowing smoke up everybody, and we'll just leave it at that. But to transition, one of the questions I wanted to ask you about is that we've seen a handful of NAL players make the leap to, the XFL, the CFL, sorry about that, and the USFL. However, it really hasn't been the numbers that we've seen from the IFL, the FCF. Why do you think that is?
I think part of it, and this is the other side of the coin to me, if you're talking Ironman, it is a give or take, because I think in our modern day football atmosphere. We want specialized players. We want folks that we can evaluate just that position or so. Iron Man does have a caveat, and I won't ignore it. It is a caveat of, jack of all trades, master of none type of, setup. There are specialty players. There's 2 of them per team. This year they're going to be doing 3, with one of those being specifically lineman-based specialty players. Nonetheless, though, it does make evaluation a little harder. I think if you're a receiver, if you're a running back, especially running backs. I mean, in the NAL, most running backs are generally close to lineman size levels of, upper weight. There are a few examples. Trayvon Shorts, they used him as an IFL style running back last year to great effect. It's one of the main reasons the Empire did a really good job in terms of adjusting their game plan midseason. But Shorts is a linebacker first. That's the thing. Iron Man does skew some things, I think, and that does hurt a few instances of trying to get up that level. Nonetheless, if you are a specialist and if you succeed really well on one side of the ball, you can make an impact. Like I said, case in point, DJ Myers. He was already a really good receiver, basically showed he still can be that, and he has extra hustle if he wanted to maybe parlay himself into a different position later on. But Iron Man, to me personally, that is the drawback. You have more issues with evaluating talent because you're playing 2 ways. That is how I have viewed it, and how some people have also viewed it that I've talked to.
100%. We've talked off camera about this, so I'll go ahead and bring it up right now.
Mm-hmm.
But the conditioning level of these guys that are able to play, literally the whole entire game has to be next level. And then on top of that, when you think about the special teams viability of wide receivers, of quarterbacks that are playing defense, stuff like that, you really have to realize that there are different ways to look at the NAL rather than, okay, this guy only spent half of his time at wide receiver. I really didn't get to see exactly what he would be if he was a full-time receiver or whatever it may be. To me, I think that's a case of coaches getting a little bit lazy in their, scouting process. But to be honest, I think that'll all change, over the next couple of years as the NAL continues to gain a name and Iron Man ball becomes more prevalent.
Right. Well, Manas will tell you straight up, and this is the last time we talked to him before the championship. There, you can tell a noticeable difference in conditioning from week 1 to week 14 last year. But it definitely, Iron Man, definitely, you have to be at your top level of your game. Conditioning wise, that's what you're going to get a benefit from Iron Man players. Those guys have to go through extra work to sustain themselves. Yes, there's line shifts. Yes, you can swap out folks for part of a quarter and bring them back in, but you got to be ready to play the majority of a game if you want to keep up, especially with how high scoring it is, how often you're running back and forth. I mean, arena is the basketball of football. That is without a doubt how the sport is. High scoring, quick, tons of motion. You got to be consistently moving around and getting scores and getting to the other side of the field, because without it, I mean, you're not going to keep up in this game. Even more so, I think even in outdoors, you're allowed to there's still some time you can kind of get up, catch your breath a little bit, unless you're playing, kind of a fast-paced up tempo, which doesn't happen as often. Arena, it's generally that normal pace of a little bit quicker, a little more up to the ball and go, to get to the scores you need to be the last man standing in what is generally a shootout. So yeah, I think that's your selling point, is your conditioning, if you want to do it that way. And to me, the more the game is there and is present with the people, I think the better that helps with maybe even scouts saying, okay, I can go and look at arena players again. I mean, the AFL in its golden day, there were folks that were getting looked at because they were, Iron Men. They had strength and conditioning on their side if you're a specialty player, and that helped translate them to allow them to get better looks because, okay, this dude is fully physically fit. He's making impact plays even when he's tired. I can take a look at this. And I think that only can help as time goes on. As Commissioner Siegfried has said to us previously and to others, he wants to bring back the arena football player, which is that specific set. Well-conditioned, plays 2 ways, can hit hard, play fast, and can stay at that level for an entire 60 minutes in a game that is that quick-paced and that much up and go.
100%. I mean, Chris Siegfried, former AFL player, if I'm not mistaken. So he definitely
and head coach
knows.
of the Pittsburgh Power too.
Exactly. So he knows exactly what it takes to be successful in Ironman ball himself. So Moving on, I wanted to talk about the two franchises that are joining the NAL for the 2023 season. Let's start with Fayetteville. What are your initial thoughts on the franchise so far and the team they've assembled so far in free agency?
So Fayetteville, I was kind of holding back because I think they were waiting for the open free agency period, November 1st. That was for those that are following in the NAL, you can talk openly with teammates that you had on your previous team from the previous year to try and re-sign them, basically from the end of the season all the way up to November 1st. Once November 1st hits, it's fair game. You can talk to anyone. You can bring in anybody from any team and do as you please. And I think Fayetteville, just because they were new, we're talking a brand new team, like start from scratch. This isn't a team like, West Texas where you're bringing guys over like San Antonio last year where they brought some of their guys. You got to build this up and you got to sell your team. And I think that was what they were doing, was gathering folks in the background, or at least saying, hey, we'll talk to you when it's officially able to talk and do this. And sure enough, that is exactly what they have done. I was worried about them at first. The longer free agency has gone, the more I think giddy I get about what Fayetteville can be, just from some of the folks that they brought in initially and guys that I think are either solid quality guys or guys that have upside that maybe were ready to go to their next level. I'll be honest with you, Rakeem Cato with the Orlando Predators last year, I thought that he was doing an excellent job. Dude is a shifty little quarterback that can sling the rock well. They just couldn't finish drives, and they got hot and cold at times during last season's campaign, and things didn't work out. He left earlier in the year. They let him go, and I was wondering if he'd be back in the NAL. And when Fayetteville showed him on the transaction page, I was ecstatic, because that's a decent quality arena quarterback that, proved himself last year and deserved a starting job. Not only that, but he's getting weapons around him now that I'm like, yes, this is great. Like Kendrick Ings, star return man, all NAL talent for the Carolina Cobras the last few years. They flipped him over to go stay in the state, just go play in Fayetteville. That's going to make a fun little rivalry bit between them and Carolina this season. And Ings is a threat. Someone else they brought in, Milton Williams. That was a recent signing, mostly known for being, an AFL receiver with the Baltimore Brigade. So good AFL talent. He's actually listed as a DBLB though, so he's kind of flipping things up a little, but his speed, his knowledge of the game, that's going to help a lot. Chris Page, also a pretty solid DB that was with the Predators too. You're going to bring him on in. There's decent talents here that they're signing on. A lot better than I thought. Will they, to me, be the favorites in the NAL? I don't think so. Will they be pushing, I think, for possibly one of those playoff positions? They're going to be scrappy every week. So you got to be really happy what Fayetteville brings to the table. As for West Texas, a few more unknowns, because I will admit some of the people that they're bringing back I got to research. However, everything I've seen is some of the best players they brought back, starting quarterback positions, some of the specialty players. They brought the right guys back. Also signed Kerry Starks, the defensive player of the year for the NAL last year, sack leader in the NAL. Dude's got a motor. Dude's vicious. The fact that they got him away from Columbus and he signed over in West Texas and Odessa, massive win for the West Texas Warbirds. They're going to have a threatening defense alone just from him. Also, they signed Sean Lockett before this show, who was already an NAL talent. He went to the IFL for the last few years. Really great center for any team you sign him onto. And West Texas is going to be shoring up that line one way or another. He's listed as a two-way player. I'm curious if he will stay that way, but that's a great way to shore up your line. Like I said, a few more questions. I got to do a little more research on some of the players with West Texas in terms of specialty, but everything I'm seeing with Coach Smith's team, everything I hear about the Warbirds, and the fact that they have a reputation to hold. They're undefeated since they've existed. So I like the swagger they're bringing in. Again, I put them in with Fayetteville right now as I think they're going to be scrappy. I think that they will be fighting for one of the lower seeded playoff positions. I could be wrong, but they are going to be a hard out. Them in Fayetteville, I like the additions and the ownership groups I've talked to, both different setups, but honestly, I love the visions of both. Separately, it's unique. And I do see West Texas in particular just continuing that westward expansion, being that far west section of the NAL, because they want to get Central U.S. and East Coast as their main base. they're a pretty good anchor, getting you farther than San Antonio. I like what they're seeing, and I like what they're trying to be with it in terms of ambition. And I think that's great. They have a good community in Odessa too. And of course it's Texas football, great recruiting base that you can have with them and the Gunslingers being in that state.
Absolutely. We got a couple more comments from Freddie. He's always the guy with the extra knowledge. So he says Cato is a player some folks might know from his college days with Marshall. And then Jairu Campbell is a great get if he gets back up to his 2018 D2 Player of the Year level.
So yes, definitely. And Campbell is one that I've done some film, but not enough. He is one of the main quarterback options for the West Texas Warbirds. I definitely think that there is upside just from hearing about him with some of those accolades that Freddie mentioned. And yes, Cato, you'll remember him from Marshall, but Cato last year, me and Jim were kind of on he's played some, but he hasn't gotten a bunch of experience. Last year, he showed that, he deserves to be starting somewhere in one of these leagues. And luckily, it's in the NAL. I'm glad that they brought him back. He gets to go and play in Fayetteville, kind of hit a reset on his career in the NAL and go somewhere that he gets to be with some decent, talented guys and make an impact in a new market. So, yeah, good points from Freddie. I'll definitely be doing more on Jairu Campbell in terms of researching. I've heard a lot of good stuff about him. That's all I can tell you. That is a good quarterback from what I hear. Hopefully that translates to an even better level of play with the NAL.
I would agree. One of the players I'm most excited about with West Texas, other than Kerry Starks, like you mentioned, huge fan of Kerry Starks. Shout out to him if he's watching. Wide receiver, defensive back, Carlos Thompson. So Carlos Thompson was with the Sioux Falls Storm last season. As soon as the West Texas Warbirds announced they were going to the NAL, shortly thereafter, Thompson signed on. So I was super excited to see that. He also had an XFL Draft invite. He's a very, very good two-way player. Definitely going to be exciting to watch him with West Texas as well this season.
This is what I love with expansion teams is, we saw with San Antonio, and credit, San Antonio's situation was a little different because they kind of evolved after they got a new ownership group early in the season. I don't see that happening with either one of these guys, by the way, if I'm being honest. These guys came to play. Everything I've seen with them, they're focusing and investing into these teams very well. But with San Antonio last year, you didn't know what you were going to get. And even at the end of the year, they made changes to where they were right on the cusp of a possible playoff berth if they had just gotten a few plays to go their way in one or two matchups. West Texas, again, an experienced team. They're coming in. They've been hungry, I think, since they've joined the arena indoor circuit to be in a legitimate league. And this is their first big stance in being that legitimate team in a big time league, which is the NAL. And then Fayetteville, basically Dr. Robert Twaddell, he's been in the arena scene in several other leagues. He actually brought Charles Gungings, who's been in many of the lower level leagues, especially Fayetteville teams. So those two know the market very well. And Dr. Twaddell very much loves this sport. He is a dedicated owner. He loves arena football, and I love hearing that. That's a guy that doesn't want to quit on it, and he's ready to do what it takes to make this work. So good times ahead. And the fact that the NAL's at 8 teams now, it just feels better. It feels right. 8's just a really good base number. And if all these teams are solid, which it sounds like they are, and things can build from that base, it only can go up from here. It's a good base to have for this next season and rebuilding from COVID.
I would agree, and that's one thing that you never really know when it comes to these arena leagues is a team could come in one season, fold the next, and West Texas is one of those teams that you bring in that they've got a track record of success, of high level, taking care of their players, et cetera, et cetera. So they probably have a solid future in mind. And then Fayetteville, you might have a little bit of a question about, but with the fact that they were brought in, I guarantee the NAL vetted the ownership group very heavily before they ever accepted their, offer for a team.
Their vetting process, and I know some people are saying, well, wait a minute, San Antonio. I'm like, trust me, I asked about it even before San Antonio had to switch things over. They have gotten so much better than when they first started as a league. And in 2017, everything I've talked to was about finding what sticks, getting teams in, building a league, and just getting things on the ground running. And they learned their lessons. They took their lumps. Everything I've talked with owners since, they took their lumps from those early years. It's about finding dedicated folks that they have the capital, they want to build this right, and that they know their market and business plan right out of the bat. And that nothing is having strings attached to things in the background. It's all about consistent stuff. That's actually part of the reason why they dropped the Louisville Extreme back in the day a few years ago, was they saw what the writing on the wall was. They originally brought him in, they went, oh crap, and they moved on because they learned from those mistakes. They only make those choices, and not to mention, you also have, it's the most expensive expansion fee in the biz. And I know that, sure, that's, it's money in the NAL's pocket. Yes, but keep this in mind. If you can prove you can purchase that and buy your team, odds are you probably have the money to fund it. You know, I know that, yeah, there's an excuse for it's money going back to the league's pocket right away. But to me, that proves that you have the finances to not only get in, but to do this the right way. You've basically said, hey, I'm not effing around. I'm laying this money on the table. We're getting a damn team put in our market. That's what that means to me. So
100%. I love that point that you made because that's very important. And I think it's more about showing the solidity of a team than it is really the fact that, that the NAL needs the money from the team, so to speak. Mm-hmm. It's more they want to make sure they're bringing in the correct teams. Freddie's got a great question for you. I've got some thoughts on this one as well. Any thoughts on if they considered poaching a CIF team or two for that Midwest contingent?
Ooh. I'd love to hear, actually, Sam, if you don't mind. I'm curious because, I mean, I know you talk, I mean, I do some CIF, but I know you're definitely much more in CIF country than I am. So I know you actually talk a good CIF amount of times too. You associate with the Beef, right?
Yeah, actually. So we just launched a show earlier this week about the Omaha Beef. So that is one team that I could definitely see making the jump if the NAL gave them a call. Although Ricky Burtz is very, very highly involved with the CIF. So right. That'd be a hard-pressed sell to them. But there's a couple teams that I could see ultimately entertaining the jump. And I know for a fact that a couple other teams have desires to move up eventually. I don't know what the contracts look like as far as CIF teams. Two teams that I would keep an eye on are Gillette and Billings. They have new ownership group with Steven Titus involved now, and he hasn't necessarily said that he has any desire to leave the CIF. So this is more assumption based on my part.
Speculation zone, exactly. Shady Sports Network edition.
Exactly. There you go. So it's more me just kind of reading the tea leaves and kind of wondering his ultimate goals for the team. But ultimately, I think those would be the first two teams that I would see. And that's kind of a stretch given the distance from where all the NAL teams are to where these two teams are located. Right. We're talking Billings, Montana, with Gillette, Wyoming. So there is that thought process in mind.
Yeah, this is where regions come into play because I could say Billings to me and Gillette, they would be IFL editions right away, just because the regions make more sense. And this is the thing with CIF. Unlike the IFL and the NAL, yeah, sure, the IFL's got Massachusetts, but let's be real, they're more Midwest and West Coast based regional. The NAL is just now going west, but they're really more in East Coast, Southeast, Northeast. Like they run a whole loop around the outside rim. So that's how they run their shtick. The CIF is really just kind of that middle band of the country, basically from like Kansas all the way up to, we talk about, about Montana and of course, Wyoming, but it's really the middle band. So if you're the NAL, you don't want to go too far more west or north. Part of it is, of course, travel costs. That is really a big deal with this. Even if they're going to Odessa, you have to be prepared as the West Texas Warbirds. You have to take on that challenge. Even San Antonio is still a good several hours drive just to make that trip over there. So I think if you're the NAL, you want more professional teams. I think like you see West Texas, like there's opportunities. We can convince people. West Texas has connections with the CIF. Keep that in mind, that they have had talks in the past with CIF teams. They've associated with CIF teams in the past. So there is that. If I was looking at the landscape, I mean, the Beef, personally, I'd love to have the Beef. I think that'd be a great addition. That would solidify the NAL even more as a league because, let's be honest, in terms of each one's league, here's how I view it. You got the stalwarts like the Sharks and the Rattlers. Those are the two bigger names, the ones that have been around for a while and the ones that are kind of like the marquee franchises that help really kickstart or have helped rebuild up these leagues. Rattlers, in terms of their move when they went in 2016, they helped the IFL really get up. The Beef are kind of that crown jewel team in the CIF. On one end, you're like, yeah, if they want to go up another level, that's great. They can choose either one. On the other, though, you wonder where the CIF stands if you lose a team like that in Omaha. They do have Sioux Falls. I know Sioux City, which has a massive pull in their own right. That's actually one I see the least leaving, because I think that they really want the CIF to be their own baby, from what I've ever been able to tell. But I'll be honest. I think Omaha, if they really wanted to move up and kind of make that fan base even bigger, that'd be really cool. To me, if you're looking at like teams that are closer to the NAL range, I think if Topeka for some reason was more stable, and if they weren't owned by Sioux City, I would have said Topeka possibly, but they have to stabilize themselves. The fact they almost closed down this past year was, you got to worry about that. Otherwise, I think it just depends how many want to travel more is the main deal. I wish Billings and Gillette to me seem more reasonable. It's just their travel's long. Rapid City travels a lot. That's going to be a lot for those NAL teams to do that. That's why I'm actually going to stick with Omaha as really the most realistic. It's going to be harder because they are the CIF to me. Their crown jewel of that league is the Omaha Beef. But if there's any team that I think would make that jump and maybe try to get that next level, and it has a reasonable chance because of the travel distance, the Beef is on my list.
I would agree. Another state that they should definitely target if they're really looking this direction is Kansas. I mean, because you got Southwest Kansas there, you got Salina Liberty, you also have Topeka, like you said. So
personally, I want the NAL to start targeting kind of my area of the country. And that's selfish a little, but I'll be frank with you. There's a lot of south, there's that mid-south, there's the, middle north or the eastern Midwest type of range, like Indiana, Ohio, because to me, the IFL, of course, people talk about the Columbus Wild Dogs. I'm going to be honest with you people, I don't think they're coming back. And it's been too many years, sights down. There's a lot of evidence that they have kind of not been able to make this work. To me, if you're the NAL, Columbus is a prime market for the taking. I want them to come to Indianapolis. I can give them a few places right now, and I would head up that marketing team. That's just, I love that. I love this. I would love the city to love it that much. But I'm just saying, there's a lot of stuff in between the coasts that I think if you can find a market, and it'd be a harder sell because of the recency, but, retry Louisville, but get a realistic ownership group that knows what they're doing. Because I thought the IFL had a good winner in Louisville. They just didn't have the right ownership group. They had the arena. They had everything up and set. They just didn't have the money. Find a group that has the cash and is dedicated to this. And Louisville, Kentucky's sitting right there. I bet you could pull that off. I thought it was a good market. I would go back, but I wouldn't go now. Give it a few more years, try again, let the bad taste of the extreme get out of people's mouths. Redo it with a legitimate group that is really serious about, making a team, not just about quick cash and possibly swinging it, making it year by year, but go back. That's how I'd want it. There's a lot of potential for this middle area closer to the East Coast that just hasn't really been touched yet. And I think it's just, the coastlines and everything, I think that's what they're looking at and making it easy for travel. Hopefully it stabilizes. You can then start going middle of that section right there. Or for the sake of the IFL, they start moving east. One of the two things happens between one of those leagues. To me, is what's going to happen. I don't see the NAL going hard West Coast. They know there's too much battleground over there. But the IFL, to me, they maybe go East Coast, mainly because they got to support Massachusetts. That's the deal. So you got a few scenarios in that. A lot of ground that should be covered. That could be covered. I would cover it.
Yeah, I'm actually quite surprised that Massachusetts ever left the NAL and went to the IFL in the first place. It was slightly surprising given their region that they play in. But a market that I would say that if you're going to look for an expansion team as well, why not Chicago? They had a solid support for the Rush. So
if you could get the Rush back, I'd be thrilled. And I didn't even go to a Rush game when I was growing up because I followed arena football a little bit. I remember Mike Ditka commercials for the Rush growing up as a kid because those were a thing in the area. Like Mike Ditka was a part owner / or GM. I forget which one at the time before the Rush went under. And I wouldn't mind going back. And quite frankly, they could partner up with the Chicago Wolves like they did back in the day. Go to I don't know if it's the Allstate Arena anymore, but go back to Rosemont, play where they were successful up there in, north of the city, near O'Hare Airport. And you can make it successful. You just got to get the right ownership group, and you got to get the right marketing team too. Because if you're talking large city like Chicago, you have to hit the ground running, and it has to be really hard getting boots on the ground and convincing people this is worth going to again. So city's great. Love it. But you just really have to sell people if you're going to go there.
100%. And Freddie speculates on the fact that perhaps Pirates could move back to the NAL once they kind of solidify themselves as a competitor to the IFL.
I wishfully think that they could. I want them to. I think that to me, and maybe this sounds, preachy on terms of one league side, but I'll be honest with you. The arena's not like, right now, the state of arena is not like a national sport like the NFL or the USFL or what the XFL is going to do here with the flights. They don't have that money. You can't throw a bunch of travel money around and make a profit right now. It's just not that big anymore, or it's not as big as it used to be, and it still needs to grow back. Massachusetts, I mean, some people probably will say, I don't know how they're turning a profit. I mean, they have really dedicated, wealthy owners, but it's got to be more for passion because they have to do a lot of traveling. And I mean, going that far out west takes a lot of money and team dollars to do that right. You honestly could save money and possibly turn a profit by just going back to the East Coast. My thing is, they were moved from the NAL in the first place. And that is kind of a pride thing. I've heard stuff like this before in leagues where, do you go back to a league you left on bad terms? I think that's the question that hangs over. And right now, I don't think they do that. They had a perfect in, I think, this year to do it, and it didn't happen. I just don't see them happening. If anything, I think, and this has been a rumor swirling around too on like fan forums, this isn't like confirmed, but to me, I think they're more likely to move the team somewhere closer West Coast than to switch back to the NAL, just because I think going back would be looked upon in a weird light by some people. But honestly, if there weren't egos involved, come back to the NAL. The NAL would easily welcome them back, and they would, to me, have a perfect natural Northeast rival in Albany, sitting right down the road from them, that they could play a few games a year. And the travel dollars they'd save enough, I bet that they could turn a profit. I know right now they aren't turning a profit in Massachusetts as it is. They probably would push closer to that if you are in the East Coast.
Yeah, I mean, they're making some big moves too, so they're definitely spending some money.
They got Cardell Jones now.
Exactly. So, I mean, I think that was shocking, first of all, to see them sign Cardale, to see Cardale even go down to that level after recently being with the CFL. He played in the XFL in 2020. NFL fans are going to know that name from his time in Buffalo. It's just amazing to see that he's actually down in the IFL currently. But I think that's just an indication of the partnership between the IFL and the XFL. Yeah. I think it really has changed players' opinion on playing indoor football. I would caution players who may or may not catch this, that the NAL has the same exact thing. They will let you out of your contract. They'll put you on an exempt list to go to the USFL, to go to the XFL, to go to the NFL or the CFL. So I just want to make that clear. The partnership is great. It is awesome. It's working for both leagues, but you don't necessarily need that partnership on paper to move up from any of these leagues. So don't necessarily, weigh your IFL options higher due to that. If the NAL team's calling you and they're telling you they want you to start, I would highly recommend going there and fully, realizing your opportunities.
Absolutely. That's been like you said, it's a mainstay in this league. It's a mainstay in any of the arena leagues, honestly. Even CIF, they'll allow for that type of movement. It's because how do you negotiate with a player that you're going to hold their contract hostage when you're going to make more just going to a practice squad for any of these leagues right off the bat? It's hard that you can't do that. So, they understand. But the thing is, too, you keep the player rights. So they can come back to you. Say say they end their season and they want to come back. There's a contract waiting for you right there. You can play a little more, get a little more cheddar in your pocket and a little more film. That's the other key. You sell, you get more film. That also helps, too. So, yeah, the NAL, they've already had, there's possibilities. There's opportunities. Actually, we already saw one player that already has taken that opportunity. The Albany Empire, they signed a Vaughn Taylor Jr., who was originally on the Empire for like 2 weeks, and now he's with the Pittsburgh Maulers. So they will allow movement. You just have to, say, hey, if I'm coming back, I'll come back with you. If you go to another league, then they suspend your rights to the league until you basically go talk with them. That's with any one of these ones. The NAL suspend you right away if you go for an IFL contract or vice versa with the IFL. So, but if you come right back to your team, you're golden. You can go right back in on that contract that way.
Exactly. So I've got one more question from you before I let you get out of here, and that is, can anybody compete with the dominance that the Albany Empire have shown over the past couple seasons?
That is the burning question of the season. And I bet if Coach Manas is watching, he loves, I'll be honest, anytime we talk about the Empire, it's always about, it's definitely like making like, hey, just to let you know about this team. I love it about him. He represents his team very well. But I will be honest, you got to pick a guy that can compete. So here's my leading teams right now, or team right now. I don't think you see a rematch of the Cobras and Empire this year in the NAL Championship. No offense to Charles McCollum or anything, but I don't think they're as talented as they are this past season. Because to me, their quarterback from last year going to San Antonio makes the San Antonio Gunslingers the favorite to go against the Empire right now. And to me, they are the most dangerous team to the Empire's repeating championship run at this time. And it really is not just Jonathan Bain. Khalil Rashad's back as well. They brought a lot of their key stars back. Pierre Turner as a running back is back as well. They got Dante Angus back as O-line, D-line too. Arthur Hobbs is coming over. Calvin Fantz, two former Albany Empire guys that were at least really solid contributors on those championship teams these past several years that are coming back. Drew Pearson, who is one of the best kickers in the NAL. Deuces are deadly in this league. You get good kickers, you can outpace anybody. That is one thing that helps separate the good teams from the great, is scoring touchdowns and then adding on that 2-point tack after every kickoff. So Drew Pearson being back, that is another deadly weapon going on their side. Philip Barnett coming back too. That makes two high-quality receivers on that opposite side, and someone who did pretty solid as a defender last year, by the way, as well, playing Iron Man. So put all that stuff together, you got a pretty deadly roster in my eyes. You have to keep up with Albany on both sides of the ball. In particular, you really got to be able to outsprint them and take advantage of any mistakes that they make. The San Antonio Gunslingers right now are the best equipped in the NAL to do so. The Predators could be too, but the reason I don't list Orlando right now, who's behind center? They haven't signed anyone that right now gives me the threatening glance to say, oh geez, the Predators are coming for the trophy. They have a lot of great skill players on that roster. They signed a lot of their guys from last year that were high quality, or they brought guys in like, say, a Jared Dangerfield that's going to be playing on that side. Brandon Fuentes is going to be healthy this year. That is someone that was missing crucially from the Preds last year, a star contributor, their specialty cornerback that was not there last season. Freddie Booth-Lloyd's going to be fully healthy. He was leading the league in sacks until injury late in the season, and then Kerry Starks overtook him. So he was someone that was very much in line for Defensive Player of the Year as well. They have a lot of star contributors in Orlando. I just need them to sign a quarterback that gives me that kind of like key checkbox that I can say, oh yeah, there's the guy you can compete with Albany with. Orlando's on the edge. San Antonio, I think, is right there where they can make a legitimate case.
Absolutely, and Freddie agrees with you. My ratings and setup favor Gunslingers to do well with the schedule they've got.
He loves the statistics. I was wondering if he had that.
I'm glad he said this because I wanted to mention this. Jack Sheehan signed with the Orlando Predators from the IFL, the Green Bay Blizzard. I'm actually a fan of his. I personally think that he's going to be good in Orlando. So if quarterback is your concern, you might be surprised by Orlando this season.
Maybe so. And look, you play good enough defense in the NAL too. You can take yourself pretty far. Defense is not an arena strength. Obviously, people don't expect it. But that was one thing the Preds did well 2 years ago. That was their bread and butter that helped them get to their first NAL playoff berth in their history being back, was they did an excellent job smothering teams. And they have key guys back. Look, Brandon Prentice, if he's healthy, that's instantly right there. Freddie Booth-Lloyd, if he's healthy the whole season, if these guys stay around, and if the guys returning get better as being two-way players, like Lonnie Outlaw, who was playing linebacker last year, he keeps developing, and they throw him some more targets. Larry Beavers was really good as a two-way player last year, great contributor on both sides of the ball. You get these guys the ball, and again, depending on who is their marquee, or at least their marquee passer. If he's good enough to carry them to where you can have the defense kind of hold down and keep the fort down to where they can keep in games, Orlando can be a threat. I'm just right now, Jonathan Bain being the signal caller over in San Antonio, to me alone, that just puts me right there, because that's your other side championship QB last season. And sure, he had a rough NAL championship to end the year, but that is not Jonathan Bain most of the season. That guy is a legitimate top-tier talent, and he's being put on an offense that has legitimate top-tier threats on every phase of that offense, with some defensive presence coming back from last year too. The only downside, no Justin Alexander, but it's because he's on greener pastures with the XFL. Thing that I'm looking out for, because he has that right, he has the rights to the gunslingers. Not saying he would do this, but season does end before the NAL's over. Maybe he comes back. Maybe he gets a little more tape. Come on over. You have a few contracts that you play for. Not saying he'd do it, but he is right in town, by the way, with the Brahmas. Something to keep in mind after the season's over.
Exactly. I'm glad you pointed that out. It's kind of a cool story for Justin Alexander. I mean, he played at Incarnate Ward, which is located in San Antonio, and then he ends up playing for the San Antonio Gunslingers a couple years later after a stint with the Jets, I believe it was.
Yep.
And then ultimately he ends up getting drafted by the San Antonio Brahmas. So he doesn't end up having to leave the market that he's been in for basically 4 seasons now. Very, very exciting player. And definitely super excited about him in the XFL. I mean, he was their first draft pick in the front 7. So that shows you how much they believe in him.
Dude's an animal. He deserves that draft pick. I'm so happy to see him get signed. Absolutely.
It's about time that more of these guys in the NAL get more recognition. And I think that was the ultimate respect from San Antonio. I mean, they wanted to stick with somebody who had a presence in that market. And they ultimately opted to draft one of the best in the NAL, and I think that was a great move on their part.
Without a doubt, same way. I'm looking forward to seeing how he plays. Really, that's even if, like, even me throwing that scenario where he comes back to San Antonio, it's all about him playing with the Brahmas. And if he capitalizes on that situation, he can get back to the NFL, and you just got to be happy. Period. You know, that's where these guys want to go. That's where you hope first and foremost. No matter what happens with the transactions of your team on these lower leagues, that dude stepped up another level because of his NAL experience last year, and he's getting rewarded for it. Now he can try and capitalize on this level this time.
Exactly. And one of the things that we've talked about very heavily today so far is the fact that we want to see these guys move up, because in turn it gains respect for the leagues that they play in.
Exactly.
You know, so other free agents that are top level players that are trying to make it to the XFL, the USFL, guys like a Kerry Starks, like a Jonathan Bain, like a Sam Castronova, you know, these guys that, you know, they wanted to be in the XFL. They got those XFL draft invites, or, you know, they got some USFL interest, but ultimately didn't end up in those leagues. They return knowing that they're going to get another opportunity down the line.
That's right.
Definitely. Well, this has been such a pleasure having you on. It's been a fun discussion. I knew it was going to be. I've been looking forward to this for a long time. With that being said, man, I'll go ahead and let you get the rest of your day to yourself. I know you've just got off work, so I appreciate you joining us. Have a great rest of your day, man. I appreciate it.
Hey, glad to be on here, man. I've been looking forward to this. You know, we were going to get this done, and I'm not disappointed whatsoever. It's been a great time, Sam.
Definitely. Looking forward to hopefully some more episodes in the future. Once again, if you have not checked it out, make sure to go check out the USFL podcast and the Inside the Walls podcast, both available on YouTube, as well as the Inside the Walls Discord server, where you can find out some obviously groundbreaking information about the Arena Football League, or the NAL for that matter.
Jump on in. Let's have some fun, man.
Definitely.
Check it out. Don't
Definitely. Wait. Absolutely. Well, have a great rest of your day, man. I appreciate you coming on, and it's been a pleasure. Again, thank you for everybody who tuned in. Freddie, we really appreciate all your input and your questions as per usual. I definitely want to get you on for an episode at some point as well. So with that all being said, thank you everybody who tuned in, and we will catch you in the next episode.